47 seconds. That's how long it took for my brand new neighbor, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, to call 911 on me while I was carrying a box of my late wife's books into my own home. And less than 3 hours later, that same woman would find out the unthinkable. Not only did I own this house, I owned half the damn street, including hers. You'd think that kind of reveal would stop her in her tracks. Spoiler alert, it didn't. It just made everything explode. My name is Jackson Reeves. A year ago, I was a burned-out tech exec from California, widowed at 35, drowning in silence and grief after my wife Sarah died from a brain aneurysm. I had more life insurance money than I knew what to do with, and less will to keep running the startup treadmill. So I did what broken people sometimes do. I ran away. I bought myself a lake house in Michigan. I wanted peace, fresh air, a new start. But what I got instead was a war zone disguised as suburbia. The first morning I pulled up in the moving truck, there she was, Bethany Cromwell. Platinum blonde hair sprayed into place like a helmet, expensive tennis outfit at 8:30 in the morning, and that clipboard clutched like a weapon. She stormed across the street like I'd landed a UFO in her driveway. "You can't park that truck here," she barked before she even hit my property line. "This is against community standards. I need to see your authorization papers immediately." Papers. To move into my own home. I tried to keep calm. I introduced myself, showed her the closing documents on my phone, smiled through my teeth. But she wasn't interested in facts. She looked me up and down, jeans, old MIT t-shirt, and sneered like I was garbage she couldn't believe had landed in her perfect little world. "This house belongs to the Garrison estate," she said, as if she were the human record keeper of all property transactions. "They would never sell to someone like you." Within seconds, she had her phone out, dialing 911 like she was auditioning for a soap opera. She reported me for trespassing, claimed I might be armed, and called my moving crew a burglary ring. By the time the cop rolled up, I was already questioning my sanity. Luckily, Officer Hutchinson had seen her act before. He looked at my documents, nodded, and told her in the flattest tone I've ever heard, "Ma'am, this man owns this property." The way her face cracked like glass under a hammer was almost worth the humiliation of standing there being treated like a criminal. Almost. But Bethany wasn't done. She marched back to her mansion across the street, heels stabbing the pavement, and shouted over her shoulder, "I'll be watching you, Mr. Reeves. Every violation, every infraction. You won't last a month here." That was day one. By the end of week one, I had a pile of bright orange violation notices taped to my door. Trash cans visible from the street, $200. Unauthorized vegetation. Apparently the roses planted 20 years ago weren't approved. Excessive quietness. Yes, you heard that right. $300, because according to Bethany, suspicious people are too quiet. I laughed at first, then I stopped laughing. 6 fines in 3 days. Almost $2,000 in penalties for existing. I thought about Sarah a lot those nights unpacking boxes surrounded by paper threats. She'd always said I had a knack for choosing battles worth fighting. But standing there alone staring at another notice taped to my car, I wondered if I'd made the dumbest mistake of my life. I could sell the house, walk away. Nobody would blame me. Maybe I really didn't belong here. And then Pete showed up. Pete Morrison, my next-door neighbor. The kind of guy who wore boat shorts year-round and grinned like he'd seen it all. He handed me a 6-pack and a fat folder he called the Neighborhood Survival Kit. Inside were copies of fines Bethany had slapped on other families, $3,000 for grass too long, $800 because a mailbox was 2 inches off-center harassment complaints, even photos of her measuring lawns with a ruler. Pete chuckled bitterly. "She's been running this place like her own kingdom for over a decade. Nobody's had the guts or the money to stand up to her. Maybe you're the one." That was the switch. The exact moment I stopped wondering if I should run and started planning how I could stay. Because what Pete didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't just bought this one lake house. I'd spent 6 months quietly acquiring rental homes, vacation properties, even interests in estates up and down the street. 14 properties in total. And the last piece, the Cromwell Family Trust, the legal entity that owned Bethany's mansion. By the time my lawyer emailed me that the transfers had been finalized, I wasn't just the new guy with a moving truck. I was the landlord of the tyrant across the street. Bethany, of course, doubled down. She staged driveway meetings with portable microphones blasting out new rules designed specifically to target me: $500 deposits for moving trucks, background checks for new residents, character references from current HOA members. She paraded around with her board waving made-up bylaws that referenced repealed statutes. When I asked to see the real state-filed documents, she nearly burst a blood vessel. "You can't refuse inspection," she shrieked. "I'll fine you until you beg to leave." I smiled, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Bethany, you're welcome to try." The neighbors were watching now. They'd seen her bark for years, but they'd never seen anyone bite back. And when I told them publicly that 15 houses weren't even legally part of the HOA, that Bethany had been collecting unauthorized fees for more than a decade, the cracks in her empire spread like wildfire. You could see it in their faces, the shift from fear to fury. She panicked, called an emergency meeting, demanded a special assessment $5,000 per household to build a legal war chest against me. I walked into that meeting holding a fistful of violation slips. "You know littering is a crime, right?" I said, dropping them on the table. "Because I've reported these to the sheriff. And while we're at it, maybe the rest of you would like to know how much money you've been handing over for properties that were never part of the HOA to begin with. Nearly $800,000 over the past 11 years. Where'd all that go, Bethany?" Silence. Then whispers. Then phones came out. People started looking up their deeds, their property lines, their covenants. Panic flickered across Bethany's eyes like storm clouds rolling in. For the first time in her life, she was losing control. The final blow came the next morning. She strutted to my door with a so-called cease and desist, some half-baked document she probably printed at Staples. I accepted it with a smile and handed her an envelope of my own. "Notice of inspection," I said sweetly. "From Siebes Holdings, LLC, the trustee that now controls your house. We'll be reviewing the property tomorrow at 9. Make sure it's accessible." She ripped it open, her face drained of color. "That's impossible," she gasped. "My husband handles the trust. He would never." "Never what?" "Never sign paperwork without reading it. Never cave to pressure from his siblings. You should really have a chat with Harold." And that was it. The Queen realized the throne was built on sand. That night, the community center was packed. Every resident had shown up, some out of anger, some out of sheer curiosity. Bethany tried to rally them, paint me as a fraud, a con man, an outsider trying to destroy their way of life. And then Harold stood up. The husband who'd been silent for 11 years finally opened his mouth. "Bethany," he said, voice trembling but steady. "It's over. I signed the papers. We were drowning in debt because of your lawsuits. The HOA is $300,000 in the red. Reeves gave us a way out. We're taking it. You're done." The room erupted. Shouts, demands for records, calls for her resignation. My attorney projected the numbers on the wall: nearly $2 million collected, barely $200,000 spent on actual maintenance. The rest gone. Legal fees, shell contracts, administrative costs that lined Bethany's pocket. The neighbors gasped. Someone yelled embezzlement. And then Officer Hutchinson stepped forward like the final nail in her coffin. "Mrs. Cromwell," he said, slipping cuffs over her wrists, "you'll need to come with me for questioning regarding fraud and embezzlement." Bethany screamed, kicked, threatened lawsuits, but it didn't matter. The room was done with her. The spell had broken. And as they dragged her out of the building, the neighbors who'd lived in fear for over a decade started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the wild, relieved laughter of people watching their tormentor finally fall. That's where it ended. The clipboard queen who tried to ruin my life was led away in handcuffs, and the power she clung to so desperately evaporated in an instant. Sometimes the best way to stop a bully isn't to argue or plead, it's to take away the power they thought was untouchable.